Games. I like games. You like games. We all like these things, right? But when a console releases, it's new, so there's like no games to play. Every console needs games on it. However, when a console first releases, what are you supposed to play? It's brand new. I just spent my entire paycheck on this Switch 2. It doesn't even have any games on it. What's the point? You never want to be in a situation like that, which is why every console needs a launch title. And that's what I'll be talking about today. Launch titles on consoles. Nintendo ones specifically. Launch titles, pretty much as I described them in the intro there. They're the games that you play on the console first. The first runs of a new console. Every console needs games to play, and well, when it's brand new, it needs brand new games. Launch titles are a great way to showcase the new console, what it's capable of, and the types of games to expect from it. Launch titles can range from being a simple party game that anyone can play to try and boost sales of the console, to a game that's pushing the boundaries of what could possibly exist in gaming, for the new generation of consoles to exist and come out, and new games to utilize the power in a much better way than the old ones. I mean, this looks like a literal VHS player, but I'm sure this utilizes power pretty well. Every new console needs its new games, and well, some of them are good and some of them not so good. Starting off with the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. The SNES had not that many launch titles, to be honest. It was surprisingly a pretty thin lineup. However, there was one launch title that outshone all of them. For Nintendo consoles, generally the launch title is going to be one of two games, either going to be Mario or Zelda, and if it's not, it's usually not the best of consoles. However, for the SNES, it was, and they had Super Mario World. Now, I've spoken about Super Mario World before and how much I really do like the game, and really, as a launch title, this was such an amazing one to pick. Super Mario World as a launch title is probably going to be one of the best choices they could have made for a launch title. I mean, for Super Mario World, you've essentially got what you had for original Mario games, but even better. An expansive world map with 96 levels to complete, and a whole bunch of power-ups and Yoshi and everything. It's such a large, expansive game to have as a first title on this console. Remember, at the time, games used to look like, well, the original Mario, and they weren't that large. So having a game that was this big and this expansive and has this much content in it was insane at the time. This really was one of Mario's golden eras, to be honest, as a video game. Mario did really have a good time on the SNES, and I can see why people look back on it fondly. Having this as a launch title was a really good power play from Nintendo. It really did funnel a lot of people to buy the SNES rather than something Sega made or even Atari. Another really good SNES launch title was F-Zero. Now, I've played F-Zero on the SNES before, and it's actually pretty good. It's like Super Mario Kart, but a lot faster, and of course you don't have the items. F-Zero was actually relatively technologically impressive for its time. A racing simulator within a 2D environment was actually pretty cool, and well, most consoles couldn't do that. If you wanted to have a racing game, you had to go to an arcade really for that. There wasn't really any good ones that existed on home consoles. Yeah, there were a couple on the NES, but they weren't that good, to be honest. This was the first one that really kind of blew people away. And with the SNES's new 16-bit processor, it could process games like F-Zero and actually run them really well. So F-Zero and Super Mario World were the two main launch titles for the SNES. There were some others, but out of all of them, these are the two ones people mostly remember. And it makes sense, they were really good games. And then they made the N64. What is this, some kind of sick joke? The Nintendo 64, one of the most infamous consoles ever. Being one of the first 3D consoles, it really was impressive for the time. A technological leap for gaming. Compared to the SNES, the N64 really was a big technological jump, going from flat 2D with a tiny bit of 3D rendering to full 3D gaming. I mean, how can you not look at this and not immediately think, Yay! Super Mario 64 was the launch title for the Nintendo 64, and my god, it was an amazing one. As you can probably get from this video, there's gonna be a lot of Mario games in these launch titles. However, Super Mario 64 really was a good one. It was far better than even Mario World as a launch title because it truly showcased what a console like the N64 could do with its power. Being able to show Mario moving around in this giant 3D world with even more levels and even more content than something like Super Mario World. Super Mario 64, I get why people still love the game today. I mean, it has some of the goofiest stuff in it ever. I mean, come on, do you know any other games you can do this? Super Mario 64 is one of the best games realistically ever made, or at the very least one of the most influential. It truly did change the market as a whole because it showed how good 3D gaming could be. And it showed how powerful the N64 was at the time. Now, did this really help it in the market? Not really, to be honest. The N64 it did okay, and Super Mario 64, while it definitely did help, it was not what it absolutely needed. And while I definitely wouldn't say it's a failure, I wouldn't say it's a success story either, to be honest. The N64 is an okay console for an okay time, and while Mario 64 is a really good game, it wasn't the full selling point the N64 needed. The only other notable launch title the N64 had was Pilot Wings, which was... it was Pilot Wings. I mean, have you ever heard anyone say, "Oh boy, I can't wait to play Pilot Wings"? No, you haven't. Overall, Mario 64 was a very good launch title for the Nintendo 64, and really don't get me wrong on that. However, it really wasn't all the Nintendo 64 needed. Because it was the only launch title that really anyone cared about, no one was really gonna buy an N64. If you didn't care about Mario, there was not really much reason to get the console, to be honest. Now, I could get the N64, but at the same time, I don't care for Mario. There's no Zelda game on here, or anything else. Ooh, is that Ridge Racer? I'm getting a PS1. However, the same can be said for the Nintendo GameCube, which had a far worse selection of games. I hate my life. The Nintendo GameCube was one of the only Nintendo consoles not to have some sort of Mario game or Zelda game as a launch title. It didn't even have something like Kirby or anything. It had some really just... why would you even buy these? I wouldn't even joke about buying Monkey Ball. Super Monkey Ball, interesting choice. It's not a bad game, don't get me wrong. Super Monkey Ball's a great game. However, it's not it's just not a good launch title. You don't release Super Monkey Ball as a launch title. You release Super Monkey Ball like halfway into your console's lifespan when you're like, okay, yeah, just throw something out there, give them Monkey Ball. This isn't a launch title game. No one's gonna choose a GameCube over a PlayStation or later an Xbox because of Monkey Ball. Wave Race and Star Wars also came out on the console, and well, these just aren't like games that you would need in order to have a console work well. Like, these aren't launch titles. These are, again, halfway through the lifespan of the console games, not launch title games. Eventually, however, Nintendo would release an actual full first-party game that, well, it was Luigi's Mansion. Do these guys, like, hate money? Nintendo, why? What were they doing at the time? They released Luigi's Mansion and that was the closest they got to a Mario launch title. Mario Sunshine wouldn't release till later, neither would the first Zelda game, and neither would, well, anything that anyone actually cared about. No one wanted any of these. Now, I don't really want to bash on Luigi's Mansion too much. It's a great game. Luigi's Mansion is a really good game. It's honestly one of the only truly somewhat scary Mario-type games that have ever been made. But come on, Nintendo! And the thing is to rub salt in the wound for them, it still didn't go very well after this. Even after the launch titles, they were really able to reel it back in. Mario Sunshine was a buggy mess. Mario Kart Double Dash was actually really good, so I won't give them any flack for that one. However, they also had The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. As much as I love Wind Waker and think it's a really, really good game, it's not the Zelda people wanted. People wanted a Twilight Princess type Zelda, not a Wind Waker type Zelda, so they really should have put out something like that as a launch title, and What's that in the distance? Oh my god! It's a console with Twilight Princess as a launch title! The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess was a launch title for the Nintendo Wii. And, well, it worked pretty well. That wasn't the main launch title for the Wii, though. I will say, Twilight Princess is a game that a lot of people love, and it's a Zelda that a lot of people wanted. Anyways, let me play baseball. Wii Sports! This game, man, this game. This was the true launch title for the Nintendo Wii. This is what was in all the advertising and all the commercials and everything. Everyone, and I mean everyone, wanted to play this one. I can play bowling? Nintendo, just take my money! Wii Sports is one of the few examples of a non-Mario, non-Zelda game working absolutely perfectly as a launch title. It's surprising because, again, there was Twilight Princess, which was also a launch title, but no one remembers Twilight Princess as the launch title game. They only remember Wii Sports as the launch title game for this console. And that's not to bash on Twilight Princess, that's to praise Wii Sports. And to be honest, I mean, it makes sense as to why this worked so well as a launch title. The Wii was aimed at being a casual console, one that every member of the family could play and enjoy, from the oldest to the youngest. And so advertising a game that's sports related makes sense, because, well, everyone knows what baseball or bowling or golf is, no matter who you are. And so this could relate to everyone, and advertise the Miis perfectly. Honestly, I don't think Miis would have gotten half as popular as they are if it weren't for the Wii Sports specifically. The other Wii games, they were good, and the Mii Maker was fun, but my god, Wii Sports really shot these things to the moon. Miis and Wii Sports go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other, to be honest, and, well, I really like that. The Miis really do give Wii Sports a whole lot of character that, well, it really helped the Wii thrive. Wii Sports has gotta be one of the greatest launch titles to ever have existed, to be honest. Just as a launch title, it worked so perfectly. It did exactly what Nintendo wanted it to do. Being able to encourage everyone to play the Wii because everyone knew about it and everyone knew how to play it intuitively. Then there's Nintendo Land. I need to get a financial consultant. The Wii U launched with Nintendo Land and New Super Mario Bros. U and Zombie U. Yay! The Wii U launching with these games was very interesting as a choice. I think Nintendo to some extent thought Nintendo Land could possibly have been another Wii Sports, and really it wasn't. It was a very niche idea, and while it was a cool, interesting idea, don't get me wrong there, it was a cool game, but it really wasn't a launch title game. It was alright, but it was not a system seller. New Super Mario Bros. U was definitely a bit better than it, but, I mean, really? New Soup U? The New Super Mario Bros. Series at this point had been getting completely stale and people were sick of it. So why release this as a launch title, Nintendo? I don't know. How are we gonna make our console sell? I got it! Give them the same game again! Those suckers will fall for it every time! We didn't fall for it this time. New Super Mario Bros. U just was not a launch title that really anyone was gonna buy a Wii U to play. They already had New Super Wii and, well, why would you buy a Wii U just to play what is essentially the same game? Most people probably looked at New Super U, said, oh man, they re-released the same game again? Ah, I don't care, I'll wait for them to release something good. And then left. And they never released anything really, well, system seller games for the Wii U. Mario Kart 8 was the closest they ever got to that, and it was a good game. It's the best-selling game on the Wii U, but again, it's not a system seller. So the Wii U, it failed with its launch titles, and it's part of the reason the Wii U failed at all, to be honest. The launch titles on the Wii U just weren't something that you should put out as a launch title. A New Soup game realistically shouldn't have put out again. It should have ended with 2, to be honest. Should have ended at Wii, realistically. And even if they wanted to put out a New Soup game, they should have put that out like halfway through the console's lifespan. They should have replaced it with like a 3D Mario or something. Something to really get you hooked in. But they didn't do that. The closest they ever got to a 3D Mario on the Wii U was 3D World, and, well, even that is just kind of, why, Nintendo? It isn't even a full 3D Mario, it's like 3D Land, but slightly on steroids. Nearing the end of the Wii U's lifespan, however, Nintendo would try to pick up the pace a little bit by announcing a brand new Zelda game. They called it Legend of Zelda Wii U, and no one really hear about it until, the next Nintendo console, for it being released as a launch title, similar to how Twilight Princess came out on both the GameCube and the Wii. The Nintendo Switch. Oh my god, it really does! Third best-selling console have ever existed while still selling units to this day, has an insane library of games, was such an amazing, good gimmick to have, and on top of all that, had Breath of the Wild as a launch title. Now this was a system seller. Having this giant, expansive, open-world Zelda with a huge map, that was gonna sell consoles. And it did. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild sold a lot of Switches. So many people bought the Switch just for this game alone. And I completely understand it. This was at the time a massive game, and while I don't like Breath of the Wild personally that much, I can understand why other people love it. It is such a massive game to have released on the Switch as the launch title, and such a perfect move from Nintendo to do. There was also 1-2 Switch. Yeah, 1-2 Switch. Laugh now, please. 1-2 Switch is almost a bit of a joke of a game, but realistically, it's not the worst thing ever. I think they thought it was going to be more of a Wii Sports than it was, and it ended up being more of a Nintendo Land, but it's not the worst game ever. I don't actually hate 1-2 Switch. I just really dislike its existence. 1-2 Switch is not the worst game ever. It's definitely not the best either, however. As a launch title, it was okay, and being paired with Breath of the Wild kinda did save it from being like the worst launch title ever. All of that, plus the idea of being able to switch consoles being an actually useful gimmick, was, well, combined to make a really great launch. I put Breath of the Wild in the same category as Wii Sports as one of the best launch titles that has ever existed. It really did help the Switch make that first good impression on people, and it worked. Now we're up to today. So, what's the most modern launch titles in Nintendo? Well, it's Mario Kart. Mario Kart is certainly an interesting title to launch with. In fact, Mario Kart was the only ever Mario Kart to have ever been a launch title on a Nintendo console. All of our Mario Karts have come later into the console's lifespan, so Mario Kart World being a launch title is so interesting to me. Mario Kart as a franchise started off as a very simple spin-off from normal Mario game, but has grown into be, honestly, genuinely, Nintendo's largest franchise. I mean, just looking at Switch sales, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe absolutely clears every other Switch game when it comes to sales. Mario Kart is quite literally the biggest franchise Nintendo has. It's larger than normal Mario games, it's larger than Zelda, it's larger than Animal Crossing, it's larger than anything Nintendo has. So using it as a launch title is not a bad idea. And the only problem with this is the fact that Mario Kart World has a lot of issues with it. Mario Kart World is not a perfect game. It has a lot of issues with it, and I want to be one of the people to admit that. I play a whole lot of this game. I love this game a lot, but geez, this is not a perfect game. And so having it as a launch title is an interesting choice. I think Mario Kart being a launch title isn't necessarily a bad idea. Mario Kart World specifically as a launch title isn't a good idea though. The game clearly was somewhat half-baked in a lot of its features, and it's not worked the best as a launch title. Especially with a lot of people reviewing it and a lot of people not necessarily liking it the most, it's not really very encouraging for people to buy a Switch 2 with. So compared to something like Wii Sports or Breath of the Wild, well, you can't really guess right now because the Switch 2 at this point, as I'm making this video, is still a relatively new console. I can't really gauge as to whether it's actually going to end up being one of those Breath of the Wild Wii Sports launch titles, more of a mellowed out Mario 64, or a Nintendo Land. Right now, I think it's gonna have more of the Mario 64. A very good idea for a launch title and a very good game, however, not what the console exactly needed. Now, these being two different games completely, or very different in terms of what the console needed, however, I definitely would say it still falls under that category. However, that's pretty much all the launch titles up to here. I mean, what else could we talk about? Fine. I'll quickly touch on handheld consoles, specifically two of them, that being the Game Boy and the DS. The original Game Boy as a handheld was a really cool idea, having an ability to take your games anywhere. And there was one game that really sold it. Tetris. A lot of younger people would play Mario games, but anyone would play Tetris. Anyone could understand the basic principles of Tetris and could be somewhat competent at it, so having it as a launch title was a really good idea. Especially considering, really, Tetris is more like a mobile game than anything else if you think about it. It's a really simple concept, it's repetitive gameplay. This was one of the first ever mobile game type games to have existed, and so, well, you'd understand why you want it on something like a Game Boy. So as a launch title, Tetris, I'd say, is up there with the Wii Sports and Breath of the Wilds. It's a really good idea for a launch title, and it did sell the Game Boy. A lot of people would have bought this thing for Tetris alone. The Nintendo DS as well had a launch title, that being Mario 64 DS. Super Mario 64 DS is, well, Mario 64, but a complete remake of the game on the DS. And I would say it's actually an amazing title to launch with. I'd say even better than 64. 64 and 3D gaming was to some extent thought to be something that would happen eventually. The logical jump from the SNES was to jump into full 3D, and while that was impressive, it was still on a home console that you could assume to be powerful. But imagine, less than a decade after the N64 releases, its largest 3D game you can now play anywhere in your pocket. That's insane as a concept at the time, to be able to play one of the largest, most influential games anywhere you wanted. That's an amazing idea. And Nintendo really hit it out of the park with this one. This really, truly showcased how far handhelds and consoles had come. To be able to play a full 3D game on a handheld console was insane. And I still think that is an amazing choice. I'd again put this one up there with those Breath of the Wilds and Wii Sports. It's just that's such an amazing idea for a launch title. So that really is all the launch titles that I've got there to cover. So in the end, well, what's the conclusion here? Well, Nintendo consoles have had launch titles over time, and some of them have been real good, and some of them have been real bad. Games like Nintendo Land and New Super Mario Bros. U and, well, those weird games on the GameCube just didn't work very well as launch titles. They weren't what the console needed, and to be honest, they just weren't very exciting games. You weren't gonna buy a Wii U because of Nintendo Land, and you weren't gonna buy a GameCube because of Super Monkey Ball. A console like the N64 definitely did a lot better in this department, but still, it needed more launch titles. It just didn't have enough of them. Mario 64, while it was a really good game, couldn't carry the console all on its own, so you can't really expect it to sell well. However, then you do have those gems. Breath of the Wild, Wii Sports, Super Mario 64 DS, or Tetris. These are the huge ones here. These are the games that really anyone would want to buy a console just for this game specifically. I can 100% see myself at the time wanting one of these consoles just for these games. So yeah, it makes sense as to why they sold well. These were good, huge launch titles that could appeal to a wide variety of people and showcased off a lot of what the console could do. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So, final verdict? I regret buying a Wii U, and I would like to repent for my sins. Oh, please, God, please, forgive me for buying a Wii U! I didn't mean it!